I'm George from Ireland. Welcome back to my channel once more. You've not seen my woolen dad jumper for a few months. Anyhow, in this video, I want to ponder the options Russia still has remaining to it in this illegal invasion of Ukraine. And first and foremost, the one I'd like to see them go for is peace, unconditional withdrawal of all the illegally occupied territory, exchange of prisoners. There are other terms we could come up about compensation to war crimes tribunal, but anyway, at the very least that. Failing that, the other one, status quo ante, go back to where they were on the 24th of February. Russia still illegally occupying parts of Donetsk and Luhansk districts, the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic. That sort of frozen conflict being on for 8 years had really wound down. And several months ago, you go back to, say, the end of last year, there was almost no fighting, occasional sniping across the ceasefire line. Even that would be an enormous improvement from where they are now. But I don't think Putin is going to go for either of those, nor indeed the war hawks who are close to his circles of powers. Of course, his consigliere egging him on to take ever more drastic measures. So he's called up 467,000 servicemen over the past month. Remember, it was the 21st of September call up of the 300,000. That's what really sent the cat amongst the pigeons. A lot of people seem to forget the 167,000 he called up about 10 days before that. But that was patently going so badly and the military situation deteriorating so fast, he felt compelled to call up even more. Remember, he waited till the regional elections were out of the way because Russia's got 84 regions and they've all got their legislature, and those elections were held in early September. Obviously, he was going to cheat in those. He's got total control of the media, but even then, he didn't want the cheating to be utterly blatant. Would like a bit of genuine popularity. He knew that was going to go down badly, which is why he timed it till just after the election, like the day afterwards. And anyway, so as not enough of those were coming forward, and as the military situation deteriorated for Russia alarmingly, he was obliged to do something he's very reluctant to do and call up an additional 300,000. But this shouldn't be poo-pooed too lightly. Of the 467,000 who've been summoned, some have already gone, some are already fighting at the front line. So in effect, maybe just slowing the Ukrainian rate of advance, but it is something. Otherwise, the situation was declining by the day for Russia. I don't think there have been any gains at all for Russia in the past month, maybe more than that, since Ukraine's extraordinary advance beginning in early September. And were it not for the death of Elizabeth II, this would have been a much bigger story. Certainly the United Kingdom, where I am, were it not for the Conservative government playing around with the tax rates and the pound falling through the floor, again, that will be the front page story. So I think Western leaders have been foolish in not to keep it in the headlines more by visiting Ukraine, even going one foot over the border, Biden, or send Kamala Harris or Liz Truss, and I think she could do some with some distraction from her domestic travails. Okay, so those are some of the options. Make peace or go back to status quo ante, trying to see if this mobilization can work. May well expand it to 1 million, an additional 1 million beyond the 467,000, because that's what the word on the street is, that article number 7 of the decree from the 21st of September, article 7 never been published. It says expand a further 1 million troops, but they don't have the equipment for those. I mean, even the uniforms, and those have already been sent. A few of them have got rusting rifles and so on, and a lot of the officers have been killed. Remember, NCOs have got almost no authority in the Russian army, can simply pass orders down the chain of command, no initiative. So without a cadre of officers, how can they do well? And they just don't promote people from the ranks. Occasionally, it's field promotion as you'd have in an Occidental army. So they may well be running around like headless chickens without enough officers to take control of them. And of course, you need a long time. You need obviously over a year to become a decent soldier, they say, basic training, and learn some of the increasingly sophisticated technology that's used in warfare, not just for directly fighting, but for communicating and things like that. So he's going to see if that has any effect. It'll probably slow the Ukrainians, maybe stop them occasionally. I don't see it's going to drive them back, but things could get a lot worse, in days. What if Kherson is surrounded? What if it's simply enveloped? There could be a rout falling back towards Crimea. The Ukrainians are surprised they haven't sort of tried to drive through from where they are in Luhansk district down to the sea near Mariupol, go just to the west of Mariupol, not try and fight their way through the rubble there, and then cut off the land bridge, something like that. and it's unclear when a retreat turns into a rout, when panic stations could set in, a big psychological blow like the surrender of Kherson or withdrawal therefrom. The withdrawal from Liman, one of the few strategically sensible decisions that Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin took in this war. So if all that is going badly, as it probably will, what does he do then? Does he twist Belarus's arm into attacking? Belarus already held war games on Ukraine's northern border a few months ago to spook the Ukrainians, so they had to station some troops there in case they were attacked. I mean, when push comes to shove, would Lukashenko refuse? Say, I'm not going down with this ship. He's forcing me to do it because he knows there's absolutely a disaster for me. And Russia could say, well, we've got Russian troops in Belarus. We could invade you. I don't think Russia can actually. They're having enough trouble in Ukraine. And we could cut you off economically. Belarus, could he open up to the West? How? He'd have to release an awful lot of political prisoners, something like that. He'd have to demand Russian troops leave his country. He doesn't have a lot of options. He's sort of painted himself into a corner. But anyway, Strama army Belarus into actually attacking, that's a possibility. One of the few things he's not gone for. And then even more of his conventional forces, like he's been surprisingly circumspect with his air force, even though this war in some ways is a madcap venture, attacking such a large country with only 200,000 troops and assuming it was going to be all over fine and dandy within 3 days, and projecting such an aura of insouciance. He always has to be unflappable. Nothing ever phases him. And it's just so studied his nose in the air, his hauteur. But anyway, that's a lot to do with his Napoleon complex, and that he's likened himself to St. Peter's, not to St. Peter, to Peter the Great. And of course, he's from the city founded by Peter the Great, which Putin claims was Russian territory. Lie, was taken from the Swedes just before Peter the Great built the city there. Anyway, so he could just throw the air force at it a lot more. Now, had they done it at the beginning, that might even have ended the war quite quickly in Russian victory. But he's been cautious and held them back. And so only a few dozen Russian planes have been destroyed. So if he threw all the air assets he had at Ukraine, okay, hundreds of Russian aircraft would be destroyed, but that could even result in victory. I think unlikely now, as Ukrainian air defense has improved, as there's more equipment and things like that. And there's also hugging, as in some of the Ukrainian and Russian positions so close together. If they try to destroy the Ukrainian positions, they might even do so, but the blast could kill some of the Russian troops as well. A bit like the Germans in the Second World War, realizing that the Soviets were so reliant on artillery, so the Germans go really close to the Soviets, so that Soviet artillery could easily miss and kill their own men. The Soviets didn't mind about doing that too much. But it sort of almost negated the advantage that artillery would give you. So it could use a lot more of that Russian Black Sea Fleet and the Sea of Azov, bring that round, take some risks. They've only lost 5 vessels. The Navy is there to fight if there is a war, and there is a war, and go around and try and bombard the Ukrainian positions on the coast near Kherson, do something, and okay, some of them would get sunk, but that might be a risk worth taking. I mean, how come the infantry, the armor, they have to take such heavy losses, but the Air Force sustain almost no losses, and the Navy sustain almost no losses? I know it was quite a humiliation for the Russian Black Sea Fleet, Moskva, to be sent to Davy Jones's locker, but the Navy should play its role as well. Holding back, not using assets when you need them. Like the Argentines, one of their ships gets sunk, the Belgrano, and they send the rest to port. Well, why do you have a Navy? I mean, if it's too precious to risk in a war, well, then don't fight a war in the first instance. So you could try all that, and then we've talked about tactical nuclear weapons, they're biological weapons, they're chemical weapons. Now, it's supposed to be deterrence that I'll do this, that you'll know I do it. But if he does it, even chemical or biological, no doubt he will lie and lie and lie and say, no, me, little me, no, I never in my life. It was the other side. It was those evil Americans who did it. Yeah, like it was the British. They attempted to poison Sergei Skripal and his daughter. They accidentally killed that drug addict woman who found some of the poison a few days later. Yeah, it was British gangsters who killed Alexander Litvinenko, who never had anything to do with British gangsters, for or against, and so on. So any spurious explanation, anything to divert attention from the blindingly obvious explanation that it was him. So I think one splice of Occam's razor would dispense with Putin's explanations. He might try it, see what he's done, sabotaging the Nord Stream pipeline in the north, in the Baltic Sea, and people not riposting. The cyber attacks and all sorts of Western institutions on a pipeline in the United States a couple of years ago, things in Australia, things in the United Kingdom, things in Lithuania, and on and on and on. Why the West doesn't hit back with cyber attacks, that's partly because the sort of asymmetric targets, as in there are not that many targets can easily be taken down in Russia, partly because it's just less IT sophisticated. So ironically, being low tech makes them less vulnerable, whereas it's a very target-rich environment in an advanced Western economy. You could take down the Moscow Stock Exchange. It's not that big, but if they took it out the New York Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange, that would really hurt the United States and the United Kingdom badly. I don't know if cyber defenses are better there. So he's got a number of different options he could go to before going to nuclear weapons and or chemical or biological weapons. As I said, I think unfortunately he will go for a tactical nuclear weapon, but not soon. Give the mass mobilization a few weeks. Is this working? If it's not, then there's one last desperate roll of the dice. You might gamble on that sometime in November. And another thing is the grain export deal that expires in November. Of course, it could be extended, but I don't think he will. I think he'll perceive that as another pressure point to get NATO and or the EU to force Ukraine to give him some concessions. But at the moment, he doesn't seem to be satisfied with the concessions unless there's all the four of those districts plus some, even if more land, promise not to join NATO, maybe not to try and join the EU, other things like bring back Russian as a co-official language, things of that nature. Anyway, so thank you so much for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon and ensure you donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Toodaloo.